This computer.
What is she rolling? She like finds her balls.
That work?
There we go.
There we go. So we are outside, so hopefully our internet will be fine. If we freeze, we'll probably come back. So
It's usually pretty strong out here.
okay, so well, Kat, first of all, it's nice to meet you up with this way finally in person after
I
talking
know. We've
on
talked a lot.
and so much, but I'm thrilled that you're with us. We all enjoyed your book. For some of us, it was a different read than others. So before we get into the details, I thought maybe it would be nice. Do you want to share with everybody a little bit about yourself, how you got into writing? Just kind of give us your little backstory.
Absolutely. Okay, so I have been teaching, this is my 30th year. I'm going into my 30th year. And I've taught everything from kindergarten to seventh grade. My last 10 years have been in seventh grade. And so it was around 2015, I felt like I was getting a little bit burned out. And I read an obsessive amount.
Hello?
Ooh,
Hmm.
is that us or is that her?
Oh, there. I
Oh
see you
yeah.
now.
Okay.
Let's say you all froze. Um, And so I read a lot, and I was reading only like middle grade and young adult books for my classroom, for my students. And so I decided to start reading romance again because I loved romance when I was younger, and I decided to go back to it. And so after 2 years of reading romance, I was also writing, but I was writing for teaching publications like books for teachers. And one day I was getting a little burned out at that. I was writing for a company called Heinemann, and I was talking to the editor, and I said, I think I need to make sure my hobbies aren't all about my job. So, writing about teaching, reading about teaching, I needed to do something different. So, I decided to write what I was reading, which is romance. And what I always tell my students is to write what you know. We do something called NaNoWriMo every November, which is
Yeah.
national. Okay, cool. And so I do that with my students, and I have them make goals. I did it in fourth grade, fifth grade, now seventh grade. And one of the things I tell them is to lock up, your internal editor, name it, put it in a little cage. Mine's Helga. And then look around your life and see what inspires you. And so at the time, I was running a lot. I still run, but not as much. And I would run through my downtown of this tiny town I live in, and it's my hometown. I grew up here. And I moved away to Chicago, but then I came back. And so I decided, well, what if I had a romance book based in a town like mine? Who would the hero be? Who would the heroine be? And then I had a massive crush on Jason Momoa. I think he's gorgeous. And so I was like, well, let's take him and stick him in my town. What would he do? What would his job be? And that's where the writing all started. And I thought it was just going to be for me, and it would be fun, and it would just live on my computer. And so I wrote the first book, and then I wrote the second book, and then I wrote the third book, and then I wrote the fourth book. And I was just actually, no, I hadn't written the fourth book. By the third book, I joined a writing group. Um, there was one, it's since disbanded because we all left RWA. But it was in a town about an hour from me. And I went to it just to think of becoming a better writer. I still wasn't going to actually publish. But I just thought like writing was a cool hobby and it would be fun. And when I was there, one of them said there was a small publisher, and they were looking for short stories for an anthology, and it had to be about books, but a romance story. And it had to be 10,000 words. And so I took the town of Highland Falls that I'd already written three books about, and I wrote a 10,000 word short story, which later became the fourth book, Follow Your Dreams, a novella. And I submitted it to them because I thought, well, if they take it, then maybe my writing's not just for me. Maybe it's not terrible. Maybe I could actually publish it. And they immediately took it. And so then I scheduled, oh, and my dad's a lawyer. And so he made sure my contract was such that 1 year after they'd publish it, I'd get the rights back. And then I could take that story and make it longer. So that's what I did for the novella. And so then I still wasn't completely convinced I should write. And so I scheduled I guess like it's like a Zoom, but you send your manuscript off to this woman named Angela James, who's a great editor in romance. And I was just like, should I write? I'm like, is this okay? And you give her like your first 15,000 words, and then she talks to you. And she was like, you absolutely should write. And so that's where I started. And once I talked to Angela and that one company had taken the short story, I then hired editors and looked at cover designers and all of that. And that's where I got started. And then when I finally published, I published four in a row. So I did Coming Home, and then 3 weeks later, Finding Beauty, and 3 weeks later, Loving Ivy, and then 3 weeks later, Follow Your Dreams. And then I usually
Holy
publish like,
cow.
I know that was crazy, but like
Yeah.
I had done all the work ahead of time. So they're all written. I had to then just learn how to edit and I had a developmental plot editor and a copy editor for each book. And so I would work through each book. The first one, of course, had the most work to do. And then after that, my goal is one book a year and sometimes I've done another novella and that's not as hard. So then I can maybe do 2 books that year. But with teaching full time, I can't do much else. So that's how I got here.
Love it. I love it.
When you say you publish, it's through which company then?
Okay, so
How does
now
that
I
work?
publish myself.
Mm.
When I did the short story, I'm trying to think of what company that was. Oh, it's like a small little press. Let me see if I can grab it. Sincere Publishing, Sincyr. So I
Okay.
did that with them, but then I thought about so as a teacher, I am very connected to the world of children's literature, and I know a lot of editors, publishers. Like if I wanted to write a book for kids, I could easily get into publishing, but I also know like you got to get an agent and then your agent shops your book around, you know what I mean? Like, and it's a whole different ball of wax. And I was just like, I don't know that I have that kind of time because I kind of operate on my own deadlines over here. I often write the book for the majority of it over the summer because that's when I actually have time. So what I just did when I published the short story, um, I then had to make the decision if I was going to actually try to publish traditionally or if I was going to publish by myself for my books. And I decided to publish by myself. And so what I did, and I don't know if what you guys are all doing, but I set up a DBA, which is a doing business as, and I made a publishing name. Like I said, my dad's a lawyer, and so he said I don't need an LLC right now. And like I just figured out all the things that you need to do. Like the developmental editor I used for a long time, her name is Sue. She's amazing, Sue Brown, but she doesn't do developmental editing anymore. And then I have lady named Victory Editing, Anne, and so she does the editing part for me now. A cover designer, I get copyright, and then I have my own, like the doing business as my publishing is Red Rims Publishing. Um, and so I just created that. And that is based on my grandma because my grandma was the first woman that I knew that loved romance books. She had this big wicker basket by her, chair in the living room and it like in the 80s. And it had like all the bodice rippers and like the Fabio guys. And so she's no longer with us, but she had red glasses and you'll see my logo. I
Yeah.
sent her like a picture of her to I sent a picture of her to my friend who's a graphic designer. I'm like, can you make me a logo with like my grandma's hair and her glasses? And her maiden name is Ryan. Like my actual name is Catherine Sokolowski. But Catherine Sokolowski on the front cover of the book, that's going to take a lot of space, you know? And I teach middle school and they all know that I write. And since it's a tiny town, most of their parents read my books. So they know what my name is, but I don't want to sit there going to them and being like, hey guys, I write under Cat Ryan. And so I just shortened my first name and I took my grandma's last name. And that's how I got that.
And I think that's amazing because I just finished my first work in progress. It's with the editor, the first round of edits now. And everybody asks, how are you going to publish? How are you going to publish? And it's either way is so complicated, I feel
It
like.
is.
If you try to go the traditional route, there's pros and cons for that. If you
Mhm.
go the indie route, there's pros and cons for that. So I think, I mean, it definitely was a lot of work for you either way.
It was. And the first time I did it, it was so like scary and overwhelming, just thinking of all the steps and not wanting to miss any. Luckily, I found romance like authors are the most kind and caring people. Like one of my favorite romance authors, and I know you guys read a lot of fantasy and I read more contemporary. But her name's Kate Canterbury and she's an amazing contemporary like, romance author. And so I would message her, I'm like, how do I do this? And she would like tell me the steps or in my romance writing group that I just stumbled into because I know that I tell my students to look for resources. So I was like, is there any romance writing groups around? And so that's how I found them. And when I got there, there was all these like USA Today best-selling authors, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't belong here. And because I hadn't even published anything, I was just writing for me, and they were amazing. I'm still friends with a lot of them today, even though we don't meet as a group. But they would be like, okay, you need to do this now. I'm like, all right, good to know. Like, in the first time I uploaded it to Amazon, I was like, sure to God, I'm going to hit the wrong button. But it's like so easy. The one thing I don't do still as an author is I don't run ads. um, I'm not trying to be a huge author, and ads are so confusing to me. Like, I can't even figure it out. I've done Amazon ads, I haven't done Facebook ads. I don't see a huge difference whether you do them or not, so that's the only part that I'm still like, but then I have friends that are in traditional publishing and children's books, and like publishing houses are struggling so much. Like, a lot of the authors have to do their own advertising anyway. So
Right.
it just seems like a hot mess right now for all of them, and publishing houses keep consolidating, and then I don't even know. I mean, you're getting lost in the shuffle unless you're a huge, huge, huge author where they're like trying to keep you happy.
Right, exactly. So, well, why don't we dive into our book read for our
Yay!
summer, which was Coming Home.
Mhm.
So, why don't you give us a little like what was your inspiration for your storyline and just kind of where you took the book?
Okay. So, like I said, I was just trying to write something that was not about teaching. That was my first inspiration, was kind of just like, I love this job. I want to still love this job. Teaching is hard. I need to get away from writing about it all the time. And so,
The main character's
um,
friend was a teacher, right?
yes. And
Yes.
I
Yeah.
did, if you go on the second book, I made her a teacher. And in my first writing of it, I was writing so many teaching scenes. I'm like, oh, nope, that's not going to work because I'm trying to stay out of it. So I ended up revising the timeline of book two so that it was right before summer break, so
Hmm.
that like they wouldn't be, because otherwise I felt like a lot of the writing I was doing as a teacher was for a website like Choice Literacy, which is all about your reflections on your classroom. Or like I said, I was trying to write this book for Heinemann, and it was all about your classroom. And I'm like, I love teaching and I love libraries and I love books, so like that has to be in my book. But I'm like, if I start to get into the nitty gritty of the classroom, like I can write for you for hours, like things that actually happen in a classroom. And then it's weird. It's funny, but weird. Anyway, so I was just like, I gotta, shift. So I was trying to think of what I wanted to write about, and I decided to write about Monticello. And I think they always say the first book is a lot like the book of your heart. So I took Jason Momoa, and he was my first piece. And I was just like, if Momoa was here in Monticello, yep, there he is. I'm like, where would he go? And I'm like, and I actually follow him online. And my husband thinks it's hilarious. And I was like, I feel certain he would have an outdoors job. And so there is this gorgeous park in Monticello that is very similar to Highland Woods, although Highland Woods is bigger. And it was left to our town by this rich, eccentric dude who has since passed and has a mansion and like a lot of the stuff I describe in the book. I just made it bigger so that it would be a state park, so it would have more employees than it currently does in our town. It is a large park already. And so I put Momoa here, and I was just like, and so I started thinking, I'm like, who would he be with? And I decided, like, if I was not a teacher, I probably would be a librarian. And so that's how Emma came. I was like, I think I would, I gave her like the kind of clothing I wear. She doesn't act a lot like me, but she definitely has my clothing style, like graphic t-shirts and, cardigans and jeans, which is where I wear to school most days. And so the two of them were set in my brain. And then I needed like an inciting thing to start the book. And at the time at my school, there was a book challenge, which you have at the beginning of that book with the one lady. I think her name was Anna. No, I can't even remember. But the woman screaming about the book. And oh, am I good?
Yeah, no, our
Okay.
my speaker needed to be plugged in. I didn't get a full charge, and I don't want to
Oh,
die in the
gotcha.
middle
Good.
of you talking. So I tried to do it sneaky so it wouldn't
Oh no, you're completely
you
fine. I
wouldn't
just don't want
see.
to. I just wanted to pause if you needed me to
Yeah, no,
pause.
you're good. Miss
Okay. And
Green.
so there was a woman who had gotten really upset at our middle school about a graphic novel that her child brought home and was reading. And I found out about it on Facebook because all of these parents messaged me and they were like, "Is this about you? Because we're gonna, take on to Facebook if it's about you." Well, I'm like, "Oh God, please don't get into a Facebook fight for me." And it wasn't about me, although I'd had her child the year before. And so I'll never forget sitting down with my superintendent to explain this book. I taught all of his kids, and he's just like, "Catherine," he's like, "I want to defend you guys, but like, why do we have a graphic novel in the classroom?" And I looked at him and I'm like, "Do you think graphic means like sex or violence?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "No, it's a long comic book." I'm like, "Oh my God." And so, but so I took
Yeah,
that
and that's
scene.
who we have, and that's who we have running our school systems. That's all I'm
Uh-huh.
gonna say about that.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
yeah.
and the most hilarious part is so that woman who she loves me, but she is a little bit unhinged. She, like, when my books came out, she posted on Facebook. She's like, "Oh my gosh, my son's former teacher is releasing a book. I can't wait to read it." I'm like, "Oh my God." I mean, I tried to make it super vague so no one would ever know, but I was just like, "Oh God, I hope she likes it." Because I don't even know. So anyway, um, it was great. So I took that scene, I took this character that's a librarian, and I took Jason Momoa, and then I put them into Monticello. And then I don't plot, like, I don't know what Shannon, you do, but I don't plot out a whole book. I like thought about like, what's like for my main character of Max, like what is he struggling with? I thought about Emma, what she was struggling with, like in life. I thought about the trope that I wanted to include, which would be brother's best friend or childhood friends to lovers. And then I thought about where I wanted the book to go, but like I just sit down and I start writing, and characters just like it's like they're living a story in my head, which sounds a little bit crazy, I do realize. But I'm just like, what would they do? And what I found is that in writing all my books, someone told me to look for this, and now I see it. They say that like you have your own core story, and mine is like strong female friendships and found families and, quirky characters that support each other. And so that's where I started, and I just decided to see where it went from there. Since I write in a place that is inspired by my actual town, like my town has 6,000 people, Highland Falls has 10,000. But when I'm on a run in the morning, like I'll think about the current storyline I'm writing and I'll think, okay, what are they doing today? Like what's going to happen next? Like I'm currently writing book 9 and I'm at the very end. And so like I can't stop thinking about it. And so I just told my husband when I was done here with you guys, I'm like, I'm going to a coffee shop and I got to get some writing done because I got like 3 chapters and I'm so close. So that's where I started with Emma as the librarian. I wanted her to be more shy and I wanted her to have a friend that was loud. And that like a fierce, defender of her friend. I also really wanted her to have a library that she worked at that was in a house. That is not something that exists in my town, but there's a great author for kids named Kate DiCamillo. She wrote Because of Winn-Dixie. And I've met Kate several times. I've seen her speak, and she always talks about this house that was her like childhood library in Florida and how she loved going to it because it was like another place she felt at home. And so I was obsessed with making sure that the library in Highland Falls was in a house. And so I took my grandma. She had a good name friend named June, and June has this gorgeous house that she lived in when she was alive. And I think I actually have a picture of it on the Pinterest page for this book. But I just moved it to where I wanted it in my town, and I was like, okay, that's the Highland Library, which is the Ryan Library. And the Ryan Library is another nod to my grandma because of her maiden name, but it's also a nod to we have this like retirement community in my town, and I think it's so cool because it is on farmland and built with money that was left by these two sisters who never married. And they just decided to give to the town, and they wanted a place for people to age in place. And their name was the Tapman sisters. And so I thought when I was writing this library, I'm like, I want to have a nod Like I have lots of Easter eggs to people who live in my community because they all read the books, which is bonkers sometimes. Like I just spoke to the Rotary group here in town, which is like the business leaders, last week, and they asked me to come, and the president asked me to come, and I'm like, isn't it still like a whole bunch of old dudes? Do they really want to hear about romance books? And he's like, Catherine, he's like, well, there are a lot of them, but there are some women too, and they want to hear about the books. I'm like, okay. So I went, and it was fine. Um, but yeah, so like I have a lot of nods of things that happen in my own community because they are my strongest readers and they love seeing little Easter eggs to themselves. But so anyway, that's how I got to coming home. And it took me forever to write. Like it's the longest one I wrote for sure, like a year and a half, 2 years. And I was also reading a lot of Kristen Ashley at the time. And I don't know if you ever read Kristen Ashley, but she often writes the heroine is in first person and the hero is in third. And I had only been reading her books, so I kind of just thought that's the way it happened. And so I wrote it that way first, and it was not very balanced at all. Like there was way more Emma than there ever was Max. And so when I finally decided I was going to publish this thing, I got a developmental plot editor, and Sue looked at the book and she's like, "Okay, no." And she's like, Kristen Ashley does that, but Kristen Ashley's Kristen Ashley. And like, it doesn't make sense for most people to do that. So you need to pick first or third, and we need to equal this out. And I'm like, so much work. But it was really cool. It was a really good process for myself to go back through. By the way, my dog has just come in the room and is digging over there. And
Oh.
she's the inspiration for Poppy. But she's kind of a hot mess as well. But yeah, so it was a lot of editing, but I became a far better writer as I did it. And then every book has been a lot easier after that because I actually understood. Since I wasn't doing it to write to publish at first, I think I was just like, "Woo, let's put more scenes in with Lou, or let's do, you know what I mean?" And then when the developmental editor got in there, she's like, okay, every scene has to have like a purpose. And I'm like, purpose? I just wanted to hear more from Lou. And so I'm just like, and then she's like, no, every chapter is its own little story mountain. And like, there needs to be a reason for the chapter, or otherwise we need to get rid of it. I'm like, oh, dang, that's a lot. So
I feel like
it was
all of the
really,
editors go to the same editor school and say the same things.
it, it is, it is enlightening. Luckily, I have pretty
Yes.
tough skin. And I love learning. And so like working with her, and she was so delightful. I wish she still did developmental edits. It made me such a better writer because I was just like, I didn't even know we do this. And it makes me a better teacher because now in the classroom, I can apply all these writing lessons to my students. And then my favorite part of doing that is like, I just started school again this year, 3 days ago. And I was telling the kids, when I was 10, I wanted to be an author, but I didn't think that was a thing real people did. I thought it was like, kind of like royalty. You're born into it. And like I'm 51. So when I was going to school and in a tiny town, there was no author visits. There was no social media that told you who authors were. It was just like Beverly Cleary and Judy Blume. And I don't know who they are, but they don't live where I live. And so I didn't think it was something I could do. And now I have all these students who either have already passed my class, but it's Monticello, so it's a tiny town. So they read my books and they believe now that they can write. Or the kids I'm currently teaching that are like, well, I want to write a book too. I'm like, well, you absolutely can. And they think they can. And I think that's the coolest part of doing this is inspiring other kids to do it. But anyway, so that's where I started with Max and Emma and Poppy in Highland Falls. And that's how I got there.
What?
Put me on the spot.
Oh, you said you had
Oh.
questions.
Well, you answered my question. I've been formulating a different one.
Oh, no, I had a quick question, and it was more of one of the subplots. The brother Sully and the friend, I was a bit confused on the dynamics, especially toward the end of the book and the relationship.
Oh, yeah,
That's what you have
because
to
it
read.
changes.
That's why you got to read book 2, right?
Yeah. Well, so that kind of unfolded. I love Maggie. She's probably one of my favorite characters because she is sassy and she's not going to take any lip. And I feel like her and Sully have, all growing up just kind of clashed, like a little bit of clashing. Just because like almost like she's a little sister to him, but not really, but she annoys him in some ways. but then something happens halfway through the book, and I purposely left it out because it
Yeah.
is the prologue of book two. But
Oh,
because of it, and
foreshadowing. I see.
yeah, because of it, the dynamic gets super weird by the end of the book, and she's keeping
Okay.
a secret. So that I
Oh.
think it's one of the few books I did that as, and it's probably because that was when I was just writing for me.
I was
Because
like,
I
there
try
was
to,
no closure on that. What happened? What
yeah,
happened? I don't know what happened between those two. Okay,
yeah,
that
because
makes
usually I try to write it so that you can read any book in any order. Because in like all of the, like in a small town romance series, they can get to be like stupid long if you just write in that series forever. I'm like, I don't want everybody to have to read it in order. So like I try to make sure someone's like the couple, like Jake and Ivy in book three, you see them in other books, but book three is book three, and their story begins and ends in it. And so their Sully and Maggie's story will begin and end in their book, but the prologue is actually pulled from book one. You just didn't ever see it. It's off screen. I thought about doing some romance authors do head hopping. Do you know what I mean? Where they have multiple different points
Mhm.
of view.
yeah, yeah,
And I've seen that, but I think it's really hard to write and it's really hard to write well. And
Yeah.
so I had thought about writing a chapter from their point of view, and then I decided that I was just going to stay to them. But I
yeah.
needed the inciting incident for their book because of it's a very time sensitive one. It needed to happen before their book began. I'm
Right.
happy to spoil it for you if you want, but
Well, it's funny. Unfortunately, one of our book club members who couldn't make it today, we met on Tuesday, and she was telling us that she's read, I think, all of them.
I think so.
Yeah, because she
yay.
finished coming home, and she's like, "Well, I need to know." And so she literally has just gone through the whole series, and but she didn't mention anything like that. So I think she was trying to keep it from us.
Full
Do
myself.
you want me?
There's the trope like pictures with all the
Yeah, I was
covering.
gonna say if you look at the trope pictures, you'll know what it is. Because, and the reason I did that is because it's a trope some people really don't like. And I'm like, so at first I wasn't gonna say anything, and then I was just like, no, I should tell people because if they don't want to read it, then don't read it,
Okay, now
you
I need
know?
to know. Now I need to know. What's the
Okay,
truth?
so it's surprise pregnancy. So they hook up in
Oh
this
yeah,
book,
that's a very tough. That's a very either
yeah,
you like it or you don't. People got
right?
people got feelings about that trope.
Exactly. And so like I tried to be kind of subtle in the fact that on the cover of here, I got it right here. And the cover of Finding Beauty, her t-shirt says sorry I'm late. And I'm talking about Mary.
Oh,
Oh,
But I thought I had so much fun. Like my students and I have been talking because seventh graders are very obsessed with romance right now, and they keep telling me about Green Flag Man and blah blah blah. And he's a golden retriever, Mrs. Sokolowski, and I'm like, geez, Louise, kids. But I told because they were asking me if I'd ever written a golden retriever hero. I'm like, a lot of mine are, but Sully for sure is because as soon as he finds out that she's pregnant, he's just like, let's go.
well,
Let me take
I
care of.
think it's even in fantasy genre right now, like everybody loves the morally gray character, don't get me wrong, but I feel
Mhm.
like there's this shift where people aren't they're not really like they like the enemies to lovers, but they're kind of like, okay, we want kind of like whatever that version of the Labrador was.
yeah.
Oh,
I was gonna say because, like, for example, like right now I'm almost done with Quicksilver, and it's not
uh-huh.
my favorite with the enemy to lover. Like, it's
Oh, but when it flips, it's so good. It's so good when it finally flips.
and I
I
and
think
I
people are starting to want something that they would want in real life
Right.
too. Because
yeah.
Right.
as a fantasy, it's really nice, like the enemies to lover, the morally gray. But in real life, you would
You
not
want
want
Yeah,
more of
that.
what
yeah,
she has.
Oh,
yeah.
for
But what's
sure.
interesting, because so the fantasy book that I just wrote, my main, there's two men, but the main male character, it's a forgotten memories, fated mates. So like so
Oh,
we never have that enemies to lovers. It's more that he's morally gray because they're she's lost her memories and he hasn't and he's got to wait for her to get them back type of thing. So I kind of took the whole Labrador and shifted it a little bit
yep.
because I feel like sometimes we just want that guy to be good right from the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think especially in today's era, like people are just exhausted. That's what I hear from readers a lot is that they're exhausted and they just need to know that there's good things happening, and even if it's in our fictional stories. And so that's what.
I like having a balance. So I think like books like yours to me was like an easy, light
Mhm. Yeah.
read. It wasn't
Yep.
heavy, like, but when you come off of reading things like The Women and Nightingale and things that make me cry,
Christine Hanna. Yeah.
yeah. So like a lot of times, because I love a good historical fiction, absolutely
Oh
love
yeah.
them. A lot of times they're very deep. And
Hmm.
so I like
And
to
heavy.
balance, yeah,
Yes.
I like to balance, like I read a variety of genres because what that does is it allows my brain to help find a happy, like a medium
Hmm.
and
And I
give
think I
myself that break.
balance, yeah, I
Yeah.
balance going between romance because I have, like I tell my students all the time, I have anxiety massively. And so I depend on a romance because it's going to say there's a happy ending and everything is going to work out in some way at the end.
Mhm.
And so I read mostly that. But then because I'm a language arts teacher, I read widely, genre wise, in middle grade and young adult because the only way I can get my students to read is if I'm actually reading current books and can like match a kid to a book and be like, I think you would like this. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
my reading life balances that way. But
It,
yeah,
it-
like,
it's like, well, that's one of the reasons when our first book club read in the spring was When Gods Fall, which was
mhm,
kind of fantasy, very heavy, emotional things going on
yeah.
between these
Adventure, world
adventure,
building.
epic world, yeah, these type of things. So when we were going to our summer read, everyone was like, we need a palate cleanser, right? We need something fun and light that we can get into, which
Mhm.
because I do so much within the authors on TikTok. I was like,
Yes.
I know a couple, and there were a couple others I threw out, and I generally throw out like four indie
Mhm.
authors, and then they vote on the one that
Yeah.
they
I
like.
love your
So
guys' book club and how you do it on Discord and all of that. That's so smart. I've been a part of a lot of different book clubs, so I like that format.
yeah, it's Discord makes it really easy to do. So I know you said you're currently working and almost finished with the next book in the
Mhm.
series. Would you
Oh,
have
well,
anything?
the ninth book.
The ninth book, sorry, the
Yeah.
ninth book. Do you have anything plotted out past that?
I have there, so with it being a small town, like I keep track, and I don't know how you keep track for your writing, but I have like a giant Google spreadsheet. And the first tab is like the characters for each book. But then one of the tabs across the bottom is like any character I introduce, what book I introduce them in, like how old they are, what do they look like, occupation and that. So I have an obscene amount of characters. Like if I was not teaching, I could just write a crazy amount of books. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to continue just doing it as Highland Falls or if like I think I'd still be in that world, but I could easily make like a sub series of like coffee shop Highland Falls, the Highland Falls Woods people, the library. Because like I have people I've left at like all of the
You should do like a bed and breakfast and people
oh, that's
coming
a
in
great
to
idea.
visit Highland
Hmm.
Falls.
Can
And
we
then somebody can come in.
open
Well,
it
and I
Yeah.
up?
have there's in what book was that? I think it's book the fifth book, starting over. The hero of that one is just left the firefighters, the hot shots. And he had a reason he had to leave in Colorado, and he's come to Highland Falls because his brother lives here. And his former like partner comes at some point and then leaves. And there's like a very vague thing of maybe that happened in that book. And I have a lot of people that write to me and they're like, I need to know what happens with kind of like you with Sully and Maggie. They're like, what happened with James and Christine? And I'm like, I don't know what happened with James and Christine. I think they hooked up, but like that was what my brain told me to write. And they're both very, very sassy. So I think that's why. But or like the book I'm currently writing is Noah and Jules. And Noah had a child with Ivy from book three, and that she's a single mom in that book. And they were just really good friends all through childhood and college, had a kid, but then he went off and he was doing some work in Africa. Because I have a friend that was doing well work in Africa. And so but he's a great guy. And so every time people read that book, I get a message and it's like, is Noah getting his own book? I'm like, yes, he is, but I just have to get to it. So I'm getting into it right now. So I have lots of ideas. It's just which one like jumps to the forefront when I get done writing the next book.
Yes.
I do have one question other than can we get a new novella? Where did you get the inspiration for Emma? Like, I know you mentioned all the parts that you took from you, but do you actually have a fairly quiet librarian friend, or did you go to your library and like try to get information on how it works? What more the library
Um,
side of it?
So I have lots of inspirations for Emma. The first one was the way she looks came from an actress named Stana Katic, who's actually much taller than Emma would be. But I saw a picture of her when I was getting ready to write, and like, ooh, I feel like that looks like Emma. So that's that part. Her like personality as a librarian, I think could be like an amalgamation of several librarians I know, because like I have a library at my school, clearly. And so, but she's not quiet. But a lot of her, like what she believes in some phrases come from, like I take things from a lot of different people and then I put it together to make one person, if that follows. Or like I have friends, I have a huge group of friends, and so they'll be messaging me all the time. They're like, "This needs to go in a book," and so like I have a list now on my phone of this needs to go in a book ideas. But specifically Emma, like, so a lot of her personality is just different people, and a little bit of me. But then my knowledge of librarians and like how the library works, like my mom is the president of the library board, but our public library here, like the head librarian at the time that I wrote this book, she was one of my former students' parents. And so I would message her and I'm like, Kara, how does this work if you're at the library? And so she would tell me. I also did that with, we're such a tiny town, we don't have like a full-time fire department. We have volunteer firefighters. And so at the end of the book, when there's a fire and it's outside of town, I was just like, I don't even know how that works. Like, what do they do? You don't have like a fire hydrant. And so I texted a former student's parent because I've taught 2,000 kids literally here. And so I have this wide group of, people. And so Dan is a former, or he's still a volunteer firefighter. I'm like, what happens if there's a fire at Allerton? And so he gave me all the information of what would happen. My friend was the district attorney here, but now she's the judge for our area. And so I called her when I had Max's mom come and she's getting arrested. And so I'm like, would she be able to go to like a rehab program like this? And she's like, yeah, but you'd have to do this, this, and this. I have another friend who is a sergeant at our county jail. And so I was just like, how does it work when someone comes in with a DUI? So like, I think
You have
I
so
kind
many
of,
resources.
well, and
You
that
have
it's
it to your
funny because
knowledge.
like I
Wow.
left the world of writing for teachers because sometimes I would get tired of the research because like I wanted to just write. And I'm like, oh my God, I have to go find out all the people that already said this so that I can put it in here and prove it's not just me. But you do research still in fiction. It's just, but it's like you can do it online, but it's a lot faster and more accurate sometimes when I can be like, oh, who do I know? I know this person. And
And you're
so then
bringing your town kind of in your book.
yeah,
And
like in
yeah.
book and Finding Beauty, her dad is a long haul trucker. And so I have a former student's dad who does that because he used to, like sometimes if he was really missing his dad, I taught him in fourth grade. He was really missing his dad would take him on a long haul trip and I would just message them their homework. So I thought it was really cool that he'd get to experience that with his dad. And so I was like, okay, I need to know all the details on long haul trucking. What do you want to tell me? And so that was fun. But yeah, so that's where Emma came from.
Okay.
Anything else? Or we...
No, my biggest thing was the Soli. I was
Sully and
just,
Maggie.
yeah, I was
Yeah.
just.
So now
that
you
was
got to look
very
at book
confused.
2. So now you got to read the prologue for book 2.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you read the first chapter, then you'll have it.
And my only other thing was I was hoping that Emma would maintain, like, I understand they moved in together, but in
Mhm.
today's, like, if she'd maintained ownership of her house so that like she still retained like a woman,
Oh.
how, you know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
she
Yep,
had still had
absolutely.
her,
Hmm.
you know, her
Yeah.
control of the, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
Anyway,
I got you.
but that was my only
Mhm.
other thing on that. But so
Cool.
good.
Well, Kat, I want to. It's over there, puppy. It's over there, right up here.
My dog is a ball.
Yeah, I didn't throw it far enough.
Oh,
But
that's so
Kat,
sweet.
I appreciate you so much being with us, for sending us the bookmarks, for willing to come on and talk with us today.
Yeah, it
I
was fun.
enjoyed your book, and I will make sure that everybody in the group, I'll put out your Goodreads and your Amazon to make sure people give you reviews, because we all know how important reviews are
Oh
to
yeah.
authors. So we'll make sure people review, and I'll connect them with your social media platforms, so they can keep in touch with all the things that you got going on.
I do have one more question. Sorry, I know
Oh,
we're closing up. Are you ever going to turn your books into audiobooks? Because I was hoping at some point, I was like, maybe I can download this audible, and it's not out there. At least not that I could
Yeah,
find.
it's not. Oh, that's another part that I haven't done yet. It costs like $3,000 an audiobook to make an
Okay.
audiobook. And you could do it, like Amazon has offered to let me do it where it's AI, but I'm like, I don't want to take away from people whose jobs are audiobooks. I just feel
right.
like that's not cool. And so, yeah, I've gone back and forth. I actually teased my son because his job, like my oldest son, he has a YouTube channel and that's how he makes a living, and it's huge. But he does like these voiceovers, or like these voice things for long-term like anime series, and he explains the like psychology behind it, I guess you would say, but his voice is really good. And so I'm like, Luke, maybe you need to make like my audiobooks. He's like, absolutely not, I am not reading your books. I'm like,
So I
come
will
on.
tell you, there is a huge audiobook narrator community on TikTok, and a
Yeah.
lot of them have really reasonable rates for indie authors. Like, they want to help indie. In fact, I
Ooh.
just connected with Katie Booth, who she did the graphic audio narration of Poppy in For Blood and Ash, if you've ever read that book.
Oh,
Yep.
She's like Poppy is like one of my favorite characters, and my female character I kind of based a little bit off of her. So when I
Mhm.
connected, and she's going to do some audio tidbits just for like promotion for me, and then we're going to talk more. So that might be an option.
Yeah, you and
Is
I are gonna have to talk about that
Yeah,
so
let's
that I
connect
can,
on that,
yes,
because
because
the
I would love to
girl,
do that.
I can't remember her name. It begins with a K, who did Violet in Fourth Wing,
Yep.
and she did the Handmaiden in From Blood and Ash, Poppy's Handmaiden, Tawny. She's on there. Teddy Hamilton's on there. I mean, there's also a huge, huge community of just regular people who are trying to get started.
she's wet.
So, so anyway, let's connect on,
Yeah. Yeah, we're in
because
chat. Thank you
that's
for that question.
yeah, because that's probably what I'm gonna do, because like you said, I
Okay.
don't want to use AI. I'm so
No.
anti AI when it comes to the art stuff, and
Oh God, yeah. Yeah.
there might be some good things. So we'll connect on that.
Yep. Well, guys, have a great swim.
Yes, thank you. You
Thank
have a
you.
great enjoy your writing.
Okay, thanks. Have a good one.
Have a
Okay,
good rest of your
Bye.
Saturday. Bye.
bye.
Bye.